Hello guys, and welcome back all 1,300 members of this channel. Today we're going to be talking about how long, or rather we're going to be calculating how long it's going to take for F1 fans to turn on Max Verstappen. Now, as many of you know, winning in F1 is a great thing for a driver. It means that they can steal the records, they can steal the show, they can walk away with easy wins essentially. But on the downside, after a period of time, fans always, and I mean always, inevitably turn on them. They make the sport less interesting, they make it more predictable, and as a fan, you don't want to see that. So the same drivers that everyone wanted to win in the first place, they now want to fail. Case in point, Schumacher, Lewis, and Vettel. All of them had periods of domination which started out amazing, but which ended in the sport sorely needing someone to dethrone them and fans not really liking them. Now, in this video, I'm going to be focusing a bit more on Lewis and Hamilton, mainly because back in Schumacher's time and domination periods before that, we didn't have social media, and social media has amplified how much fans interact in their dislike of a driver winning. Now let's start this at the Australian GP, because I think it's a great point to start there, and since it is the last race. The Australian GP is a GP in which Max did not win, surprising to many, including myself. Now, the question I have, and that I've seen a lot of people throw out, is was the GP any more interesting if Max was in the race 20 seconds ahead? Or was the fact that Carlos was in the lead all that the fans needed to get engaged in the Grand Prix? Because I will be honest, after looking back at the Grand Prix, it was definitely a good Grand Prix. And to be honest, it was better than I expected. But I think the fact that Max went out so early, it made it more engaging, because all of a sudden Sainz could be caught. There could be more battles for the lead. It wasn't Sainz automatically is going to win this race. So I think the threat of a fight is partly what makes a Grand Prix interesting, sometimes even more so than the fight itself. All you need is a car that's 1.5, 2 seconds behind and closing, or that has the ability and the talent to close, and all of a sudden you've got a race on your hands. And we're going to come back to instances like the Australian GP later on in this video. But for now, I'm going to need you guys to take a look back into the past, and we're going to look at Schumacher, Seb, and Hamilton. Now, Schumacher's reign was sorely dominant, and so was Seb's, and so was Hamilton. But I think it's best to start at Sebastian Vettel and dismiss Schumacher simply because it isn't the same as today. Schumacher was in a time in which, well, let me put this lightly. If Schumacher did what he did in 1994 when he crashed out Damon Hill, imagine if Twitter was around back then. Imagine if Twitter was around when Schumacher was driving aggressively, should I say. He would have been flamed. He wouldn't be regarded as the same pure-hearted racing driver he is today. So for that purpose, I think it's more applicable to start with Sebastian Vettel, because Sebastian Vettel's reign in the early 2010s really symbolizes both the start of social media as a really big entity and fans' collective hate towards a driver. Sebastian Vettel in 2010, everyone loved that season. That season was full of joy. They had so many different drivers contesting for the lead, contesting for the championship. In fact, Seb only led the championship in the last race of the season. And so I wouldn't say this year is the year that everyone was fed up of Seb and they wanted his domination to end. However, 2011 was a slightly different story. In 2011, Sebastian Vettel absolutely dominated the competition. He really did dominate. And although there might have been wins from other drivers, I think 2011 is when we really solidified, okay, Sebastian Vettel is genuinely going to be the guy to beat for this era. And surely enough, he was. Now in 2012, it was kind of the same as 2010, where there was so much different competition. They had the infamous 6 champions on the grid, and there was so much going back and forth during that season that I wouldn't begrudge fans for enjoying that season. That season had different winners, that had different podium sitters. It really did toss things up and give you a reason to love Formula One, even though Seb did win again. Now, I think the final nail in the coffin, and obviously it was his last championship win, was 2013. 2013 was peak Seb domination, in my opinion. It's where he got his most wins. It's where, you have all the infamous photos of him in India and stuff like that. It really was a Seb show. And by that point, he was getting booed at Grand Prix for winning so much. Fans were turning on him. Hamilton was saying that dominance could bore fans. Ironic. It was his 4th year of winning that made him hated by fans. Well, I wouldn't say made him hated by fans. I think a better way to phrase that was that the hate set in. Because when a driver starts winning, if they're not your favorite driver, although you might be happy for them, as I'm sure many people are happy that Carlos Sainz won in Australia, but I'm sure many Hamilton fans, many Charles fans, many Lando Norris fans would have also wished, that was an opportunity that they could win that race. So I think it's more so that the hate set in, that, okay, people just start to get tired. They get worn thin by seeing the same guy win again and again. Now let's go on to Hamilton. Now, obviously, Hamilton won in 2008, but it wasn't until the 2010s, the mid to late 2010s, that we really saw the fight of Hamilton. In 2014, he had a title race with Nico Rosberg that went down to the last Grand Prix in Abu Dhabi. And by that point, it was really, really nice to see Lewis win another championship. He hadn't won one for a long time, and many people were simply just happy for him to win again. Now, obviously, we'd seen the gap that Mercedes had pulled to the rest of the field, and everyone was kind of scared for what would happen next year. But as an individual, Lewis hadn't won like that in ages, obviously being plagued by horrible reliability by the McLaren in previous years, and sometimes lack of pace, like in 2009. But in 2015, Hamilton stole the show. And I think this is the first instance we started to see that Lewis was getting a little bit of hate. In 2015, he absolutely steamrolled Nico Rosberg into an emphatic title win. Now, I wouldn't say that he was hated, or the hate had set in by fans at this point, but in the second year in, we can clearly see that fans were starting to get a little bit tired of Hamilton winning. He won a bit too much, even Nico couldn't compete with him that year, and everyone was starting to be worn a bit thin. But alas, 2016. Now, 2016 was an incredible title battle within the team and completely destroyed the relationship of Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. And we're going to jump in this story just to say that there is a theme here. I'm not sure if you can see the theme. I'm going to point out the theme here. That is stopping fans from completely hating a driver. 2016 ends, obviously Lewis loses in the last race of the season, and 2017 starts. Now in 2017, Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton are going at it for the title. And to speed this up, we're going to skip to the end and say, in the end of the season, Lewis Hamilton comes out on top. Now in 2018, Lewis is now a hated driver. From 2018, 19 and 20, the hate that Lewis Hamilton receives and the want for him to lose builds up tremendously. Now, after we've gone through this, obviously he won in 18, 19 and 20, and obviously Max won in 2021. But as we can see, it took Seb 4 years and it took Lewis 4 years. There's one crucial detail that hasn't really happened to Max Verstappen that has happened with those two. And that crucial detail is opposition challenge. See, in 2010 and 2012, they were both great title fights that was exciting to fans, and different drivers were winning races. So although fans didn't like Sebastian Vettel's domination, they provided a good essence for, okay, so at least other people are winning races. Now in 2011, 2013, fans got really worn thin with him because he was winning all of the races. Similarly, in 2014 and 2016, fans could see that not only Lewis Hamilton was winning races, sure, Nico Rosberg was winning the majority of the races Hamilton didn't win, but it was better than just seeing Hamilton on the top step of the podium. And if we contrast that to Max Verstappen obviously had that great title fight in 2021. And in 2022, he more or less dominated after about 5 races. And in 2023, we saw the most dominant season in F1 history. I know we're all high off Australia and someone else winning the Grand Prix, but let's all keep it very honest here. We don't see someone putting up a title challenge against Max Verstappen. The only reason, really and truly, that he lost that race is because his brakes started to malfunction. If you see it, they started to malfunction going into like turn 4, and then it led all the way till Sainz overtaking him, and he couldn't come back because the brakes essentially caught fire. So without that reliability issue, Max Verstappen is still the force to be reckoned with. And the point here is that every time a driver other than the dominant driver wins a race, it buys that driver more time. Now, Max Verstappen has dominated one season, he's dominated another season, and in this season, if he dominates, next season, in 2025, Max Verstappen will be the most hated driver on the grid, hands down. You heard it here first. And I'm not sure if this is a very controversial take, but that will be it. Simply because Max isn't competitive with anyone. And not only is he not competitive, he hasn't been competitive for a while. The last time we really saw Max competitive was in 2021, 3 years ago. And I find it kind of interesting, not ironic, but slightly interesting, that F1 fans, in the beginning, when they first saw Max Verstappen and when they first saw Lewis Hamilton and when they first saw Sebastian Vettel, they all wanted these young hotshots to win races. But somewhere along the line, everyone always turns on these drivers. Now, I think there is a lesson to be learned here, and that lesson is that F1 fans don't know what they want. I mean to talk about this in a whole nother video, but I think I'm going to dedicate some parts of this video here. This bit is not scripted in the slightest. F1 fans suffer very much, or very heavily, from recency bias. A bias to where that right now is all you can see. You can't see what happened in the past. You can't remember what happened in the past. Take a look at my comment section from any video where I've compared a driver's performance and all of a sudden the driver is horrible or great depending on how they're doing now. Case in point, Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz won the Australian Grand Prix, and rightly so, he deserves to get praise for it. But let's not act like Carlos Sainz is all of a sudden has better pace than Charles Leclerc or Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen, because that simply isn't true. 2 years ago in 2022, everyone was calling for Carlos Sainz to be sacked from Ferrari. They were calling for his head. Why? Because he was DNFing, he wasn't helping Charles in his title fight early on in the season, and everyone was saying he isn't cut out to stretch in Ferrari. They were saying he had one good season in 22. I'll give you another example. Lewis Hamilton. If you look at my recent video on Lewis Hamilton, a lot of people are saying he's washed and that he isn't a great driver, even though literally months ago, last season, like 4 months ago, last season, he put that Mercedes, which was basically never the best car on the grid, P3 in the Drivers' Championship. Now, I'm sure you could probably fill in the gap, but you could basically apply this to any driver. Daniel Ricciardo has zero talent whatsoever because he's driving badly now. Obviously, he's not driving the best and it's not great, but to say he has zero talent is false. He does have talent. He just hasn't really proved himself that much in this era of cars. I think as a community, we can always come together and say, this driver has this quality, this driver has that quality, and we can try and compare them. But I think it's very bad of us to try and say, you know what, because this driver is performing slightly bad now, or they're not performing up to scratch right now, then it's time to send them away and they shouldn't be on the F1 grid, or they shouldn't be in the seat that they have. Because ultimately, when you look at teams like Ferrari and they sign a driver like Hamilton, and then you look at Carlos Sainz performing so well, you're like, wow, why can't Ferrari just keep Sainz? He's performing so well. And then you remember that Sainz has had a better car than Hamilton for the past 3 years, and that a couple of years ago when they did have the car to challenge for a title, Sainz was binning it, he was crashing, he was constantly off the pace. And this relates to this video because fans will not only forget the performances of the drivers in the past, but they will also forget the drivers that they liked in the past. All of a sudden, the driver that they liked not so long ago is arrogant, is bullish. Think of the way people turned on George Russell. Obviously, he's done some things that haven't really looked that good on him, but think of the way people have turned on George Russell from his Williams days to his Mercedes days. All of a sudden, now that he's no longer the underdog and he's starting to have a better car, he's no longer the guy everyone is rooting for to succeed. When George Russell had a great qualifying in Williams, everyone was singing his praises. But now if George Russell makes a mistake, you can't go on social media anywhere without hearing a joke about it. This is just me saying that you shouldn't be so quick to hate drivers. You shouldn't be so quick to turn on drivers, because drivers are human beings. They aren't perfect. Sometimes they say the word crikey. Sometimes they're off the pace. Obviously, they should be on the pace most of the time, but if they take a little while to catch up, that's fine. I'm not excusing Daniel Ricciardo though. Daniel Ricciardo needs to get his act together. But still, so to conclude the video, Max Verstappen is going to be the most hated driver in 2026 if he wins the 2024 and 2025 season in dominating fashion. If you guys like the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.